One night in August 1961, the people of Berlin went to sleep in one city. When they woke up, they lived in two. A wall had appeared overnight. Not just any wall. A wall that would split families, end friendships, and become the most powerful symbol of a divided world. For 28 years, this concrete barrier stood as a monument to fear, ideology, and the human cost of global politics. Thousands tried to cross it. Many died trying. But here's what most people don't know. The Berlin Wall didn't fall because of politics or diplomacy. It fell because of a mistake. One confused official, one misunderstood question, one accidental answer. And in that moment, the Cold War began to end. This is the story of how a single error changed the world. Part 1. The city that became a symbol. To understand the wall, you have to understand Berlin. When World War II ended in 1945, Germany lay in ruins. The Allied powers, the United States, Britain, France, and the Soviet Union had defeated Nazi Germany together. But victory brought a new problem. Who would control what came next? Germany was divided into 4 zones of occupation. The Americans took the south, the British took the northwest, the French took the southwest, and the Soviets took the east. Berlin, the capital, sat deep inside the Soviet zone. But Berlin itself was also divided into 4 sectors, one for each power. At first, this seemed temporary, a practical solution until Germany could be reunified. But as months turned into years, the temporary became permanent. The wartime alliance between the Western powers and the Soviet Union was cracking. 2 different visions for the future were emerging. On one side, democracy, capitalism, individual freedom. On the other, communism, central planning, collective control. Berlin became the front line of this ideological war, and the people of Berlin found themselves trapped in the middle. Part 2. A city divided. By 1949, the division was complete. West Germany became the Federal Republic of Germany, aligned with the West. East Germany became the German Democratic Republic, a Soviet satellite state. But Berlin remained split. West Berlin, surrounded by communist East Germany, became an island of Western democracy, deep behind the Iron Curtain. The contrast was stark. In West Berlin, Marshall Plan money poured in. Buildings were rebuilt. Businesses reopened. Life slowly returned to normal. The economy grew. Goods filled the stores. People could travel, speak freely, build lives. In East Berlin, Soviet-style communism took hold. The economy was centrally planned. Industries were nationalized. Free speech was monitored. Life was harder, more controlled, more gray. And here's where the real problem began. The border between East and West Berlin was open. People could walk from one side to the other, and they did. Thousands of them. Between 1949 and 1961, more than 2.5 million East Germans fled to the West. That's nearly 1/6 of the entire East German population. These weren't just random refugees. They were often the young, the educated, the skilled, doctors, engineers, teachers, scientists. The very people East Germany needed most were leaving. The East German government called them traitors, but people kept leaving anyway. They left because they wanted freedom. They left because they wanted opportunity. They left because they could. The Soviet Union watched this exodus with growing alarm. East Germany was bleeding talent and legitimacy. Something had to be done. Part 3. The night the wall went up, the decision was made in secret. Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev and East German leader Walter Ulbricht, agreed. The border must be sealed. On the night of August 12, 1961, the operation began. At precisely 1 o'clock in the morning, East German soldiers and workers fanned out across Berlin. They carried barbed wire, concrete posts, and orders to act quickly. By dawn, a barrier stretched across the city. At first, it was crude: barbed wire, wooden barricades, armed guards. But the message was clear. The border was closed. Families woke up separated. A father who worked in West Berlin couldn't get home to his family in the east. A grandmother living 3 blocks away became unreachable. Friends who'd planned to meet for coffee found themselves on opposite sides of an impenetrable barrier. The scenes that day were heartbreaking. People gathered on both sides of the new border, calling out to loved ones they could see but couldn't reach. Some tried to run across before the barrier was complete. Some made it, many didn't. In the West, there was shock and outrage, but there was also a grim calculation. Confronting this act militarily could trigger World War III. The Western powers protested loudly but did not act, and so the barrier remained. Over the following months and years, it evolved. The barbed wire became concrete. The concrete became a wall 4 meters high. Behind that wall, the East Germans built a death strip: guard towers, floodlights, attack dogs, mines, and a second inner wall. The Berlin Wall became the most heavily fortified border in human history. Not to keep invaders out, but to keep citizens in. Part 4. Life in the shadow of the wall. For 28 years, the wall defined Berlin. In the West, it became a tourist attraction. World leaders visited to make speeches. President John F. Kennedy stood before it in 1963 and declared, "Ich bin ein Berliner. I am a Berliner." President Ronald Reagan stood there in 1987 and challenged, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." Artists covered the western side with graffiti, turning it into the world's longest canvas. But on the eastern side, the wall was blank, forbidding, untouchable. Approaching it without permission could get you shot. East Germans lived with constant surveillance. The Stasi, East Germany's secret police, employed hundreds of thousands of informants. Neighbors spied on neighbors. Friends reported friends. Trust eroded. Yet despite the danger, people never stopped trying to escape. They tunneled under the wall. They hid in car trunks and hollowed out compartments. They built hot air balloons and homemade aircraft. They swam through canals and climbed over barbed wire. Some attempts were ingenious. One family spent months digging a tunnel from a basement in the east to a building in the west. 2 families built a hot air balloon from scraps of fabric and flew over the wall at night. But many attempts ended in tragedy. At least 140 people died trying to cross the Berlin Wall. They were shot by guards, killed by mines, or drowned in canals. The most famous victim was Peter Fechter. In August 1962, the 18-year-old bricklayer tried to climb the wall. He was shot by border guards and fell back into the death strip. He lay there for nearly an hour, bleeding and calling for help, while soldiers on both sides watched. No one came. He died in front of horrified witnesses. His death became a symbol of the wall's cruelty and a reminder: this barrier wasn't just concrete. It was a choice, a system, a philosophy that valued control over human life. Part 5. The cracks begin to show. By the late 1980s, the world was changing. Mikhail Gorbachev had become the leader of the Soviet Union. He spoke of glasnost, openness, and perestroika, restructuring. He believed the Soviet system needed reform, not more repression. Across Eastern Europe, Communist governments felt the ground shifting beneath them. Poland had solidarity, a workers' movement demanding change. Hungary began opening its borders. Czechoslovakia saw protests. East Germany's leadership, under Erich Honecker, resisted change. They insisted the wall was necessary, permanent, essential. But the people were watching. Throughout 1989, East Germans began leaving through an unexpected route: Hungary. Hungary had opened its border with Austria, creating a hole in the Iron Curtain. Thousands of East Germans traveled to Hungary on vacation and then crossed into Austria and from there to West Germany. By autumn, the pressure was unbearable. East Germans weren't just leaving quietly anymore. They were protesting in the streets. In Leipzig, 70,000 people marched, chanting, "Wir sind das Volk," "We are the people." The government faced a choice: crack down violently or concede. Honecker wanted to crush the protests. But Gorbachev made it clear: Soviet tanks would not intervene this time. On October 18th, Honecker resigned. His replacement, Egon Krenz, tried to calm the situation by promising reforms. But it was too little, too late. The people wanted freedom, and they wanted it now. Part 6. The mistake that changed everything. November 9th, 1989. The East German government had decided to ease travel restrictions. Citizens would be allowed to apply for exit visas, but the process would be bureaucratic and controlled. The new rules were supposed to take effect the next day, with proper procedures in place. But nobody told Günter Schabowski. Schabowski was a member of the Politburo, the ruling committee of East Germany. That evening, he was tasked with announcing the new travel regulations at a live press conference. He had barely read the memo. As the press conference neared its end, an Italian journalist asked, "When do these new rules take effect?" Schabowski shuffled through his papers, looking confused. He hesitated. Then he said, "As far as I know, immediately, without delay." The room erupted. Journalists couldn't believe what they'd just heard. Was he saying East Germans could travel freely right now? Schabowski, realizing he might have misspoken, tried to clarify. But the damage, or rather the miracle, was done. Part 7. The night the wall fell. Within minutes, the news spread across East and West Berlin. East Germans heard it on television and radio. The borders were open. At first, people were skeptical. Was it real? Was it a trick? But slowly, people began heading to the border checkpoints, first in small groups, then in waves. The border guards had received no instructions. They stood at their posts, watching crowds gather, unsure what to do. Their superiors didn't know either. The phones rang constantly, but no clear orders came. At checkpoint Bornholmer Strasse, the pressure became unbearable. Thousands of people pressed against the gates, demanding to cross. At 10:30 p.m., the commander of the checkpoint made a decision. He couldn't hold them back any longer. He opened the gates. The crowd surged through. And then, something remarkable happened. They weren't arrested. They weren't turned back. They were through. Word spread instantly. Other checkpoints opened. People flooded across the border in both directions. East Berliners poured into West Berlin, stunned and jubilant. West Berliners rushed to greet them with flowers, champagne, and tears. Strangers embraced. Families reunited. People danced on top of the wall. Some brought hammers and chisels and began chipping away at the concrete. The scenes were broadcast around the world. People who had lived their entire lives divided by ideology and concrete watched as the barrier that defined the Cold War crumbled. It wasn't a military victory. It wasn't a negotiated treaty. It was a spontaneous, peaceful revolution born from one official's confusion and the courage of ordinary people who simply walked forward. Part 8. The Aftermath. The fall of the Berlin Wall didn't immediately reunify Germany, but it made reunification inevitable. Within weeks, sections of the wall were dismantled. Families separated for decades were reunited. East Berliners explored the West with wonder and disbelief. On October 3, 1990, less than a year after the wall fell, Germany officially reunified. The two Germanys became one, but reunification was complicated. The economic gap between East and West was vast. East Germany's economy had stagnated under communism, while West Germany had thrived. Integrating the two systems required massive investment, patience, and compromise. Some East Germans felt overwhelmed by the rapid changes. Jobs disappeared as inefficient state industries collapsed. A sense of identity was lost. Even today, decades later, some divisions remain, but the wall itself is almost entirely gone. A few sections remain as memorials. The longest preserved section is the East Side Gallery, where artists have painted murals celebrating freedom and unity. Elsewhere, a line of bricks in the pavement marks where the wall once stood. Tourists walk across it without realizing. Part 9. The global impact. The fall of the Berlin Wall didn't just change Germany. It changed the world. Within 2 years, the Soviet Union collapsed. Communist regimes across Eastern Europe fell. Poland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, all transitioned away from Soviet control. The Cold War, which had dominated global politics for more than 40 years, was over. The threat of nuclear annihilation that had hung over generations began to recede. Francis Fukuyama, a political scientist, famously declared this the end of history. He argued that liberal democracy had won, that humanity had reached the final form of government. But history, as it turned out, was not over. New conflicts emerged. New walls were built. Today, there are walls and barriers dividing people in many places. The Israeli West Bank barrier, the border wall between the United States and Mexico, the demilitarized zone between North and South Korea. Each is different. Each has its own context. But each echoes the same tension: security versus freedom, control versus movement, fear versus trust. Part 10. What the Wall Teaches Us. The Berlin Wall stood for 28 years, 2 months, and 26 days. It was built on the belief that people needed to be controlled, that ideology mattered more than humanity. It fell because that belief was unsustainable. Here's what the wall teaches us. No barrier, no matter how strong, can permanently suppress the human desire for freedom. People will risk everything, their lives, their families, their futures, for the chance to choose their own path. The wall also teaches us about power and its limits. The East German government believed it could maintain control through surveillance, force, and fear. For decades, it worked. But power that relies on repression is fragile. It can collapse suddenly, unexpectedly, the moment people stop being afraid. And sometimes, history turns on the smallest moments. A confused official, a misunderstood memo, a crowd that decides to walk forward instead of turning back. Part 11. The Human Stories. Behind every statistic, every political speech, every news report, there were real people. There was Hartmut Richter, who escaped through a tunnel in 1964. He left behind his wife and young daughter, promising to send for them. It took 3 years of paperwork, bribes, and desperate waiting before they were reunited. There was Inge Benowitz, who helped dozens of people escape. She was eventually caught and spent years in prison. When asked if she regretted it, she said no. Some things, she said, are worth the risk. There was Hans-Peter Spitzner, who hid his family in the modified fuel tank of a car and drove through the checkpoint. They barely fit. They could barely breathe, but they made it. There were the families who never reunited, the friends who lost touch, the lovers separated on that night in August 1961 who never saw each other again. And there were the border guards. Young men, often barely 20 years old, given rifles and told to shoot anyone who tried to cross. Some refused and faced prison. Some obeyed and lived with the guilt. After the wall fell, many guards were prosecuted. Their defense was simple. They were following orders. The courts rejected that defense. History had already judged that excuse at Nuremberg. Part 12. Memory and Meaning. Today, Berlin is a thriving, unified city. It's a center of art, culture, technology, and politics. The scars of division have mostly healed, but the memory remains. At Bernauer Strasse, there's a memorial and documentation center. Photographs show families waving to each other across barbed wire. Audio recordings play testimonies from people who lived through it. The memorial includes a preserved section of the wall and the death strip. Standing there, you can see how close, yet how impossibly far the two sides were. At Checkpoint Charlie, once the most famous crossing point between East and West, tourists take photos with actors dressed as American and Soviet soldiers. It's become a spectacle, almost a theme park. Some Berliners resent this. They feel it trivializes the suffering, turns tragedy into entertainment, but others see it differently. The fact that people come from around the world to remember, to learn, to bear witness, that matters. Because the danger isn't in remembering incorrectly. The danger is in forgetting. Part 13. Lessons for today. We live in a world that sometimes feels more divided than ever. Political polarization, economic inequality, walls, both physical and metaphorical, separating people. The Berlin Wall's story offers uncomfortable questions. When does security become oppression? When does control become cruelty? When does fear of the other justify dividing humanity? It also offers hope, because the wall fell, not through war, but through persistence, not through violence, but through courage. It fell because people refused to accept that division was permanent. They kept trying to connect, to communicate, to cross. They kept believing that the barrier was temporary, even when it seemed eternal. And eventually, they were right. Part 14. The individuals who made history. History often focuses on leaders, politicians, the famous names. But the Berlin Wall's story belongs to ordinary people who made extraordinary choices. People like Wolfgang Fuchs, who organized tunnels and helped more than 300 people escape before he was caught. People like Hasso Herschel, who swam across the Spree River at night to reach West Berlin, dodging searchlights and bullets. People like the unnamed East German border guard who, on November 9th, made the decision to open the gate. He wasn't following orders. He was following his conscience. These weren't heroes in the traditional sense. They were students, workers, parents, ordinary people who saw injustice and decided they had to act. They remind us that history isn't made by forces beyond our control. It's made by individuals who choose to step forward. Part 15. The final lesson. If you visit Berlin today and walk where the wall once stood, you'll find something surprising. Life, cafes and shops, parks and playgrounds, people going about their daily routines. The wall that seemed so permanent, that seemed like it would stand forever, is gone. And in its place, normalcy. This is perhaps the most powerful lesson of all. What seems unchangeable can change. What seems permanent can fall. What seems impossible can happen. The Berlin Wall stood for 28 years, but it fell in one night. Not because of armies or treaties, but because people decided they'd had enough. Because one confused official made a mistake. Because ordinary people walked toward the barrier instead of away from it. And because, in the end, the desire for freedom is stronger than any wall. The Berlin Wall was many things. A symbol of division, a monument to fear, a testament to the human cost of ideology. But it was also proof that walls, no matter how high, how thick, how heavily guarded, cannot stand forever against the human spirit. If you found this story meaningful, if it helped you understand not just history but the world we live in today, consider subscribing to When History Turned. We tell the stories of the moments that quietly and sometimes loudly changed everything. The decisions that shaped nations, the mistakes that altered courses, the individuals who refused to accept the world as it was. Because history isn't just about the past. It's about understanding how we got here and imagining where we might go next. Drop a comment below and tell us, what moment in history do you want us to explore next? Because history didn't just happen, it turned, and it's still turning.